Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Welcome back. Thank you for coming back after the break. Um, so now I'd like to introduce to you to our keynote speaker and very special guest this afternoon, who is Brett May, who leads investments, acquisitions, and investments for and venture capital investments for GE Software. So Brett's had a very long and distinguished career. Brett started off as a software engineer, but as well, actually, also played saxophone with the Four Tops and a whole bunch of other Grammy Award-winning artists. A mix of creativity and tech that is so crucial to venture tech investing today. So Brett's had previously been with Cisco, MoodLogic, and McKinsey, and today we're very proud to welcome here to talk about GE Ventures and investing. Thank you very much. Brett.
Thank you. Thank you guys very much. I have a few things to go through on slides, and I guess we'll sit down and have a little chat and take some questions from the audience. Thank you guys so much for having me here today. You know, what's known about GE is it's a $150 billion annual global industrial conglomerate, last surviving member of the Dow Jones Industrial Average, oldest company in the S&P 500. What's less known about GE is it's actually also a pretty big software company. There's $4 billion of software revenue in GE, and spread across 130 different products, which makes GE about, depending on how you count, the 10th to 15th largest software company in the world. And in San Ramon, we're doing, where we're all based, some very exciting things around the industrial internet. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes about the industrial internet this morning, and then open it up to some questions about investments and some of the things that we're doing around industrial internet. Do we have the slides? Yes? Okay. Anyway, you've all heard about the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things is usually discussed in a consumer context. So, you know, it's mobile phones, it's wearables, it's belt buckles, there's a connected toothbrush. What's less talked about is the 50 billion things that are being connected in the industrial world, the world of trains, the world of power generation equipment like gas turbines and wind turbines and nuclear, the world of healthcare, large medical devices like MRIs. Those things are quickly being connected, and they're things that are not as visible to most of us. So there's, it turns out, a pretty substantial amount of money that can be made in improving, using software, using big data, using analytics to improve the outcomes of these machines in one of three ways. Either you can reduce energy burn or reduce fuel cost, reduce unplanned maintenance, or optimize a network of applications. And it turns out that there is a massive $15 trillion 15-year opportunity, 1% of global GDP and productivity, that's available by solving for these outcomes in the industrial space, which hasn't been done before. These devices haven't been connected in the past. And so what we can do is now measure that if we can improve, for example, the speed of a rail network, a network of locomotives, by 1 mile an hour, we can save $200 million for one railroad in the US alone. If we can save an airline 1% on fuel by using the data that's coming off the aircraft engine, that can be the difference between profitability and unprofitability for an airline. Fuel's their biggest cost, and it is a massive, massive opportunity. If we can do these things, we can create a gigantic amount of value, but it's not going to be easy. So what we've been doing in GE and in GE software is writing a platform and applications to get data from the machines that we make and sell, analyze it, and help our customers produce better outcomes to save money. And we have written an underlying platform for this, which I will tell you about in a couple minutes. But let me give you a few examples of the kinds of applications that we have been writing. There is an application that optimizes beds, bed usage in a hospital. So if you think about a hospital as almost a factory where people come in, get well, leave. Optimizing the beds in a hospital is a pretty complicated problem that we can use a lot of data and do. So we have an app for that. We have an app that optimizes freight trains on a network of rail cars. One of my favorite apps is our wind application, where we installed software on wind farms that help. Imagine a hillside of wind turbines, and they talk to each other. Basically, some wind turbines are operating more efficiently than others, and there's these interesting cavitation effects as a wind turbine sits in front of another wind turbine, and that produces some interesting physics. It's pretty complicated math, but it turns out that we can get wind turbines to communicate. The more efficient ones can help the less efficient ones get better, and they self-adjust on the hillside like a flock of birds. And by deploying this, we've been able to help utilities generate 5% more power from wind farms. Why is that important? They generate 20% more profit if they generate 5% more power from wind farms. And there's an app for this. My favorite app is that we've made is called Water Wash. It tells you how often you should wash your aircraft engine, because who doesn't have that problem? You know I'm often worried about how often I should wash my aircraft engine, but it turns out there's an app for that, because when you need to wash an aircraft engine, and a clean engine uses less fuel than a dirty one, you have to take the airplane out of service, and that's a complicated problem because an airplane that's out of service isn't making an airline money. And you have to take the engine apart, which means you have to deploy maintenance crew, which means a flight crew gets diverted. And it's actually a pretty complicated problem. But we've solved it using big data and analytics. And we are helping airlines save money by knowing when they should and shouldn't wash the engines on the aircraft. And there are 50 other apps that we've written in our writing. Now, why does this matter to the startup community? We realized pretty quickly that a lot of the technical architecture you need to write these applications is actually pretty common across industries. So you don't need. GE was running down a path 5 or 6 years ago where the rail division and the gas turbine division and the healthcare division were all making different decisions and building siloed technology stacks. They were making different technology decisions about which database to use, what kind of encryption to use, what kind of communications protocol to use. And it turns out that all that stuff doesn't have to be different. It's not specific to any industry. So we built a platform that's used by all GE businesses, and it's called Predix. It's a little bit like Android, except for the industrial internet. And it handles massive amounts of data. One of the things about the industrial internet is the data volumes are much larger. For example, the flight that I took here from San Francisco had 4 GE engines on it. It was a 747. It produced more data during that flight than all of Twitter produced that day. One of our gas turbines just won, same thing. Massive amounts of data. So we need a platform that processes things at exabyte scale, and we built this. Why does this matter for startups? Because we're not going to build every app that we need. And we've been getting calls from customers who don't participate in the industries that GE traditionally serves. For example, we've been getting calls from automotive, from agriculture. These aren't places where GE plays. And so we're going to open up our platform to the startup ecosystem starting in Q4 of this year. And people will be able to come and build apps for industries. And lots of people have made a fair bit of money selling apps on iTunes. That's a pretty good ecosystem. And I'll only tell you, there's a lot more money. There's a lot more in helping large industrial customers operate better. There is a massive financial opportunity. We've invested $1 billion in the software center in San Ramon to go after this. We made $1.5 billion last year solving this problem. It's the next revolution in the internet. The first one was big conglomerates optimizing their back office. The second one was CRM and social media, which we all participate in. But the industrial one, touches nearly half of all global GDP, and it's going to be really big. So with that, why don't we go to some questions and answers and some chats.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Let me try to sort out those slides.
Oh, no worries.
Right. Thank you. All right, while the guy's still trying to track them down.
Oh, that's okay.
So just, I've got the slides here on the slide. So we're going through. So how many of you here have heard of GE? All right, so that's pretty much most people here. All right. And how many people know that GE does investing? That's a few. That's not too bad. It's pretty good. So what we wanted to go through today was firstly one of the key questions I think that a lot of companies have, a lot of startups, and there's a lot of startups here in the room have, is how do they work with a company like GE? How do they get involved? I mean, what's the way that partnerships take place, and how do you guys view partnerships with startups as well as, you know, just from investing with them?
That's a great question. There are, you know, if you're producing software for the enterprise, and by that we mean big companies, one of the things you're going to have to learn how to deal with, and it can be a life or death set of decisions that you make, is understanding the corporate purchasing cycle. And it's not sexy, but it's a really important problem, because if you overinvest in pursuing a big company who isn't ready to buy, you can spend a lot of money and burn a lot of time doing that. So there is really something to be said for understanding, getting to know the people you want to sell to, understanding how their buying process works. Because, and I've seen this at GE, and it's not unique to GE, it's at many big companies. I've seen startups get to a very senior executive, have a fantastic meeting. He says, yeah, we're going to buy a bunch. And then the startup is excited, and they think they're going to get a purchase order next week. It doesn't happen, right? 6 months later, right, it still hasn't happened. And they're wondering, where's my purchase order? But this is the reality of how big companies do purchasing. You have to be smart about how you pursue these things, and you have to manage your expectations, because a company, imagine a purchasing director buying from any startup is one of 40 things he's got to worry about that week. And it may or may not be the most important thing. It may be quarter end and he's got money, or it may be not quarter end and he doesn't have money. So you have to ask. Go to the companies you deal with and ask, how do you do these things, right? How do you buy? You know, is there a year-end budget flush, right? Some companies have use it or lose it money at the end of the year. That's at the end of their fiscal year. That's a good question to ask. When's their fiscal year? So there's just really tactical things about working with big companies and understanding that they're never going to move as fast as you can. They're never going to be as nimble as you are. And but when they move, they'll move in a big way. And so it's worth the wait. But you have to manage it so you don't burn all your money, you know, chasing a sale that's going to take 6 months.
It is worth the wait. It's patience.
Absolutely.
It's patience. And it's also getting to know a lot of people in the organization, right? I think is one of the other key points.
Oh, absolutely. When I want to know where a technology is deployed inside of GE, I can't ask GE. There's no place you go. I ask the startup, hey, who are you talking to at GE? They're the only ones who really know.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, now we've had quite a few Internet of Things as in our class today. How many of you guys are working in or at an Internet of Things startup here in the audience? Wow, so it's all software? Okay, so the Internet of Things is absolutely going nuts. So I would seriously think about doing a startup in it. But when it comes to GE, where you guys are in terms of the space, are you looking to be part of the protocols that are set in, as you know, everything's been set in within the Internet of Things? So when you guys are investing, or what you're looking at investing, do you look at not just the devices themselves, but the underlying software and protocols and connectivity in the whole system?
Generally, yeah. We try to have we have a bias for open source, right? Not everything, but we aren't trying to foist off proprietary protocols on the marketplace. That is not really the way we want to go. So we want to make sure that the underlying software is compliant with. Typically, it's open source. Not always. Sometimes that's not possible. But you also got to remember in the industrial world, you're dealing with machines that last a long time, right? So any given set of protocols is going to persist forever. You buy a Fitbit, data shows those things last 6 months, and then people stop using them. You sell a gas turbine, it lasts for 25 years. It's going to go through a lot of software upgrades. So we do a lot of thinking about how compatible things are.
So GE's really in the center of some of the really big industries that are getting disrupted: healthcare, energy, transport, finance. I mean, all the big things are in your sector. So I guess it's kind of hard to say like which trends are going to be the big ones that are going to be there. So, but if you were to say to a startup in the audience, and some of these guys are thinking about it, what would you say do you think are going to be some of the biggest disruptors, or what is the biggest areas do you think from a trends perspective?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I follow a lot. One is the thing I worry about the most is cybersecurity, and that's a pretty hot area right now. It's incredibly important in the industrial domain. It's bad if your home router gets hacked and your credit card gets stolen. That's bad. But what if somebody hacks a rail signal and causes a train to go down a track it's not supposed to be going down? What if somebody hacks a gas turbine and causes it to go offline for 4 days and 20 million people are without electricity? That's really bad. So we have to do everything we can to make sure that our infrastructure is safe. And the area I look hardest at is cybersecurity, right? You can never be completely safe, right? Hackers are always, it's always an arms race, but we really try hard to make sure, and I'm always looking at interesting startups solving interesting problems around cybersecurity. That's one. Another is what I'll call data aggregation. So you have a lot of data that's laying around in a lot of different formats, and being able to get that into a common fabric that you can then actually do analytics on. There's some pretty hard problems in there. People tend to think that the hard problem is the math. It's not. The hard problem is getting the data into a position that you can then go do the math on it, because you understand the data well enough to be able to know that a phone number is 10 digits or it's 20 digits, right? And that's a surprisingly hard problem to solve. And so I'm looking for stuff that does that as well.
Very good. Last question, and we'll take a couple of questions from the audience. So just tell us a little bit about GE investing. So
Absolutely.
Why did you start this? How is it structured, and how does it work? What do you look for, and how do you make decisions?
So GE Venture Capital is something we started a few years ago, but it's fairly recent. So GE has this great history, 130 years of innovation, right? Our founder was Thomas Edison, the inventor of the light bulb. And but we also recognize that GE has no monopoly on innovation, and to keep ourselves relevant and to keep ourselves fresh, we always need to be looking out there at what the disruptive startups are doing. And so we're strategic investors. We look for companies that are going to be useful or disruptive in the industries that we care about, and are going to teach us something, and maybe we'll become a customer. GE is a customer of most of the companies in my portfolio. GE Ventures has 4 domains: healthcare, energy, advanced manufacturing, and software. I lead the software practice. We have about a $400 million portfolio today across about 55 or so startups, and it's an evergreen fund, right? And it's purely strategic. So what I mean by that is, if you're an institutional VC like a Kleiner Perkins or an NEA, the first question you ask is this thing going to make a ton of money? And then the second question is, what do they do? And do I, and is it, with us, the first question is it relevant to our industrial strategy? And if it is, then we ask the second question, which is, how do we make a ton of money? And so that's what we're looking at. And it's a great organization.
I have one last question. It was always very, very interesting with corporate ventures. Is sometimes there's a slight tricky balance to be held between, is the startup going to make a ton of money, or are we going to acquire it, and are we going to bring it in? And some corporates struggle with that because they don't want the company to get too high valued because it gets out of reach of acquisition. How do you guys handle that issue? I've seen some corporates handle it very badly, but I think you guys handle it quite well.
Yeah, buying a company that you've already got a position in doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen. I've done it before. Usually, I see it as a good thing, right? I don't worry that, oh, we could have bought it at Series A and it was only $12 million, and now it's 200, right? That's okay, right? We bought there was a reason we didn't buy it at Series A. We wanted the option. We weren't sure. The company wasn't proven. There's a lot of risk there. And if we ended up, driving a lot of value to the company because we had a commercial relationship with it, and then GE gets a piece of that upside anyway because we were an investor, and I don't see it as a problem.
Yeah.
I really don't. I don't worry about the buying something we've got a position in. If it's the right thing to do, we're going to do it.
Just Asia. How do you guys view investing in Asia overall? I mean, how much do you guys look at Asia as an investment potential?
Historically, we haven't done a lot of deals in Asia, but that's going to change in the future. I think a lot of places aspire to be venture capital hubs, or to be innovation hubs. And I think Korea is really well positioned to make a big move here. There's really 5 things you need if you want to start to duplicate what you see in Silicon Valley. You need a great education system with research universities. You need a critical mass of engineers who can build innovative things. You need rule of law, which we take for granted, but I tell you, it does not exist in most of the world in a way that it makes it good for startups. You need efficient capital markets so the investors can get their money out, and you need, finally, a place that young, innovative people just want to live. Great art, great music, great literature, great drama, great sport, whatever it is that makes a place a magnet for people. So if you have those 5 things, you can start to create a really interesting startup ecosystem. And I think I see those things here. And so that's to me, that's table stakes, and that gives you a shot. But most places don't have all 5 of those things. So that's the way I think about it. So I think it could be really exciting here in the future.
Great. Well, we've got time for just a couple of questions. You don't often have a very powerful venture capital investor on the stage. Has anyone got any questions very quickly? Yep.
My question is rather GE specific. Now that the GE has exited the financial and real estate businesses, I suppose the company's focus is going to be purely and mainly on industrial products, what you guys have been doing, trains, turbines, or so forth. Therefore, those 50-plus apps plus the OS that you've just mentioned, I suppose those would be specific for GE-produced products. First, could you comment whether that is true? And second, would GE have a plan to white label such apps for other similar products that were not made by GE?
Right. So good question. Couple things here. One, yes, we are divesting the capital division. The software center and everything I've been talking about is actually focused exclusively on the industrial side of the house. The 55 or so apps that we've written, none of them are actually for GE Capital. There's actually a wall between those 2 businesses for regulatory reasons in the U.S. And so we are exclusively, all the venture stuff, all the IoT stuff that GE is doing is focused on the industrial business. And so and that's going to continue.
Any further questions?
Sorry.
There we go. There's one over there.
Hi, John Sampson. I export startups in Europe. I've got a question about Eric Ries, Lean Startup. he's been working for you for time now. First, how did that impact your work, and how did it impact the company from your perspective?
It's really interesting. So Eric has been working with us for a while, and the place where it's had the least impact is in the software center, because it was built on the lean methodology and agile programming, and we're even moving to a pair programming model. It's had an amazing impact in the rest of GE, which was this older, less efficient industrial company with a lot of burdensome process. And there is an internal program at GE that's not really talked about in the market called FastWorks. It's basically taking lean startup things and using it to change, how we do information sharing and research, or aspects of our supply chain for turbines. And so it's actually the whole lean startup methodology, for lack of a better word, is having a tremendous impact on GE. Ironically, I don't see as much of it because the software center was purpose designed from the ground up to follow that whole methodology.
Great. Okay. Well, yeah.
Can I follow up? My original question, perhaps I should have made myself more clear. Second part of my question was whether GE's software packages that are sold in tandem with GE products, were there any plans to be made white label so that non-GE products could come with GE software capabilities?
So that's the Predix strategy, is to make the platform available so that other people can write applications on top of that. GE's applications that it's written have been for its products and its customers. Those are all for today people who use GE equipment. What is going to happen, and we've been getting requests to write applications for equipment that's not GE equipment, and we don't actually do that right now, to be honest. It's not, we're not in that business, to be honest, but what we're going to do is enlist some partners, big and small, big systems integrators, telcos, also startups, who can go off and write apps that run on Predix, and are in industries that we don't compete in, like automotive or shipping or gaming, vending machines, agriculture. These are all people who have called us and asked us about if they could use Predix. We're not going to write those apps for them, but our partners will, and they'll sell them. They'll sell them themselves, and of course, we hope that to make some money because they're leveraging our platform. But we're going to let the market decide and take care of that.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Brett. Thank you very much for coming all this way, and appreciate it. Thanks for all your views.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.